everybody that is here on the committee, as well as anybody in our audience or those watching online. Um, Before we get into our presentation today, I'd like to just go over some housekeeping items. I've handed out, or at least our committee assistant, Tessa Beam, has handed out new committee rules or updated committee rules. There's only been really some changes on the guidelines for conferees appearing before the budget committee. And so one of those changes is that we're going to limit budget presentations to 30 minutes at a maximum, just to allow us to have enough time for questions. And I want to be respectful for all our members that are that have 3:30 committee meetings as well. So we want to try to keep on schedule if possible. If anybody has any questions about these rules, please let me know. Be glad to try to answer any questions or clarify anything that you have questions about. Before we get into the presentations, I would like to make some introductions. We have some new faces on the committee this year. And I would like to introduce our new vice chair, Clark Sanders, representative from District 69, and also our new committee assistant, Tessa Beam, who's with us. And so you guys, since you're new to the committee, I'm going to have you guys introduce yourselves and say something about yourself to the committee. I know some of you may already know each other, but I would just like to go around and kick it off with our vice chair. Then we'll go to Tessa. Then we'll go over to Chuck Smith and back around this way. Okay. You might introduce yourself, where you're from, and also if you have any specific things you want to achieve on the higher ed budget committee this session. So we'll start with Vice Chair Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm District 69, which is the neighboring district of Chairman Howe. The district changed during redistricting. It's now about 10 precincts in the city of Salina and about 10 townships in rural Saline County. I went from originally having just one school district in my district, 305, and now I have three. 305 in Salina, 306 southeast of Saline, and 307 in El Saline. Of course, in Salina, we have Kansas Wesleyan University, which is, I think it's in my district. And so happy to be a part of this and happy to be serving as vice chair of higher ed. And just one quick thing, my wife was remarking to me last night as I was telling her that I was getting ready for my first committee meeting. She says, well, don't you find it kind of ironic that you're the vice chair of higher ed, seeing as you never graduated college? And I said, yeah, I suppose that is ironic, but just FYI. So I attended, but didn't graduate. So now you know. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And Tessa, if you'd like to introduce yourself to the committee. Thank you.
Sure. Hello, my name is Tessa Beam. I am born and raised in Topeka. There are a few other Beams running around the State House. We are all related. I keep getting that question. So Kale is my brother and Mike is my uncle, if you know them. But my background is largely in real estate, but I'm excited to be here and learn something new.
Thank you, Tessa. We're glad to have you with us. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chuck Smith, District 3. I had the pleasure this summer of calling Wake Up America, old Greenie. And he said, where are you from? I told him I was from the real Pittsburgh. So I'm a retired school teacher. I taught math. It was a great subject matter to teach. And like I say, it's an honor to be here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Mike Amix. I represent the 45th District, which is in Lawrence, Kansas. It's Western Lawrence and it's Northern Douglas County. I also represent Lecompton, Kansas, which is the territorial capital of the state of Kansas. So I'm very proud of that. We have the home of the University of Kansas, Haskell Indian Nation University. I have a wife that is a graduate of the Kansas State University and a son that graduated from Fort Hays State. I'm just a lowly business owner for all my life. That's all it is. Anyway, I'm very, very happy to be here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. I'll skip over myself and go to our ranking member, Representative Woodard.
Hi, everyone. Representative Brandon Woodard from District 108, which is parts of Lenexa, Olathe, and Overland Park. This is my 6th session on higher ed budget. And what's the other part? Something fun or a new job, run a foundation in Kansas City. The AIDS Service Foundation.
Thank you, Representative. Appreciate your work and your experience on the committee. Look forward to working with you.
Less conflict of interest.
Representative Wassinger.
Hi, I'm Barb Wassinger. I represent the 111th district, which is the smallest geographic district in western Kansas. I have the city of Hays and the city of Victoria right along I-70. And this is also my 6th year, I think. Have you been on this since you came on? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. So Ken Rogers has been here on the committee longest, I think. So then Brandon and I. So glad to be here.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Sawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My district is much smaller than yours. And geographically, I know. It's 95th district, which is the Delano area of Wichita. I've got both friends at Newman University in the district, and then of course I got Wichita State in the city. And I actually served on this committee, I don't know, a long time because I served in the past. So I served on appropriations for about 10 years, and I served on higher ed budget. In fact, back then we had an ed budget. We had higher ed and education were together, budget committee. So, yeah. Anyway, it's good to be back. Good to see you all.
Thank you, Representative Sawyer. Yeah.
I have my intern with me today, Logan Ginnivan. He's a KU student, grew up in Lawrence.
Thank you, Representative, and welcome, Logan. Look forward to seeing you around the committee room, and maybe we can put him to work. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Representative Fairchild from the 113th District, and I have 5 counties in my district in central Kansas. I'm a farmer. My dad and I farm together. I've been on this committee since I've been here. This is my 4th year, and I'm known for saying no and voting no.
Thank you, Representative. I'll jump back over to Representative Rajas. Then we will go to our reviser and our fiscal analyst. And I haven't been introduced yet to our new technician that keeps the digital and audio going. So we'll kind of go in that order. Representative Rajas.
Mr. Chairman, I do apologize. I did talk to the chairman just a couple minutes ago, and I said I will do my best to be here on time. And he said today, and I said no, all year. And so I have blown that away. I guess that's the prerogative of past chair. So every year is like a new committee. I did actually get rid of 2017 stuff now before the session started to make my drawer wouldn't stay shut. So I'm Ken Rogers, 110th, which is Norton, Phillips, Rooks, Graham, and the rural county part of Ellis that the good Representative Wassinger does not represent. I am a broadcaster, and I've been in the legislature now. This is my 9th year, and I'm chair of the Agriculture Committee. And like my colleague from St. John, I am used to saying yes for improvements to higher ed. I believe that it's good, but I always enjoy these debates, and I am excited for this week to learn today and tomorrow what we are. And my only question when we went through this budget, Mr. Chairman, is if this is a pay to play or if the state is expecting me to pay for most of the upgrades for the law enforcement center, as my record will show that I have paid much into the party fund of the Kansas Highway Patrol. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Now I'd like to go to our reviser. Jill, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Jill Walters, the reviser of statutes who has been assigned to this committee. I've been here 38 years. And so this is my 38th session, and I've been on budget committee since '06. And so I look forward to working with everybody. Just as a friendly reminder, if you need a bill draft or if you need floor amendments or a proviso, I'd be glad to help you out. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill, and thank you for your service to the state and to the legislature. And you work in an interesting environment, surrounded by a lot of people that want things on their timeline. And so, thank you for trying to make those things possible. Brianna.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Committee. My name is Brianna Horton. I am the Fiscal Analyst, so I work with KLRD. This is my second session, so I'm here to help answer any questions I can and help you along with the budget process because our budget is fairly big. So please let me know. And a fun fact about me is that I went to UGA, so it's always go Dogs.
Thank you, Brianna. We're delighted that you are still with our committee this year. There's always some uncertainty with not knowing who's going to be assigned to the committee, but we're glad that you're back with us for this session. I'd also like to welcome the gentleman. I haven't got a chance to meet you, sir, but if you'd like to introduce yourself to the committee.
Yes. Thank you, Chair and the committee. My name is Malik Anderson. I am with the audio and visual team here. It's just my job to make sure these meetings get broadcasted, smoothly. That's what I do.
Hey, thanks, Malik. We appreciate your expertise with us and allowing people that can't make it to the State House to be able to participate in their government. So thank you for doing that important work. And I'm Chairman, Representative Howe. This is my second session as chair of Higher Ed Budget. And so it's been a delight to work with all of you, and it's been a learning experience. Hopefully we can improve some things this session as we go through the budget deliberations. It's my goal not to drag on the budget report outs into spring break. It seems like the chairman of the Appropriations Committee wants to get things done a little bit sooner this year, so we'll work accordingly. So thank you for everybody's introductions, and we will have some announcements towards the end of the meeting about next week's agenda and a few housekeeping items like that. But we will go ahead with our introduction of our presenters before the committee today. A presentation about the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center. I'd like to welcome Darren Beck, Vice President and Associate Dean Director of the Police Training Center, to the committee. Darren, welcome to the committee. We'll just stand at ease real quick. I believe there was a technical difficulty about audio online. So I don't know if that can be quickly resolved or not, but. There could be. I did want to ask committee staff if this budget presentation was going to be on the S drive. But I know you didn't have access quite yet. Okay.
This is Tessa Beam, committee assistant. I do not quite have access to the S drive quite yet, but IT is working on giving that to me. And as soon as I do, I will put all the presentations and testimonies out there for you all.
Yeah, I just wanted to point that out because I know that Darren, you had a nice slide deck prepared. It's very informative. And so we'll get that up on the shared drive as soon as we can and share that with the committee members. Interesting for the committee staff to know that I was scheduled to receive a briefing from Darren back in December, and I was en route to Chicago, or actually Washington, D.C. with a layover in Chicago. But I got to Chicago, I got on a Zoom call with Darren, and I lost my voice. I had no voice, and I was panicked. I'm not good with technology. I'm at an airport, and I couldn't utter a word or two. And so I'm texting you guys in a panic, but you guys are very understanding and patient with me, so I appreciate it. So. Sure. Yeah, we try to make do with the time you have.
Testing.
Now, the light's on now on my mic.
Does it? Testing. There we go.
Check it on that.
Is it on now?
Can you hear me? Yes.
All right. So I guess if you want to maybe back up just a little bit and we'll kind of go from there. I thought the microphones were on, but I apologize for not recognizing that. Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Darren, did you have a handout that went with your presentation?
So I have two handouts that you already have. And honestly, this is my first time to testify in front of a budget committee, so I wasn't sure how much you were going to want in terms of like the PowerPoint that goes along with it. And I say it's the first time for me to testify because it's the first time that KLETC has ever been in front of a budget committee. And that was kind of my response too. Because we are exclusively fees funded as we stand right now, we've always gone to the committee where those fees were germane. And so most of our budget hearing has been in front of the Judiciary Committee or in front of transportation, because we're docket fees funded and we're also tag fees funded. So it's unusual for me to be in front of a budget committee. I wasn't quite sure what to expect from you all. But I did bring with me a history of what it is or how we've been funded. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Darren, I just wanted to let the committee know that the documents are uploaded on the committee website, the Kansas legislative website. So if you pull up the committee tab under Kansas ks.legislature.org and go to the Higher Education Budget Committee, and under committee documents or committee testimony, they should be listed under today, January 17th. So just wanted to let you know if you wanted to follow along. Thank you.
So it probably does not come as a surprise to any of you that that the past few years has been a difficult time in law enforcement. We truly are at a time when we're trying to decide where we want to go in the future, what it is. And what I always say is we police the way the public wants us to police. We do it through the voices of the public and largely through the legislature. So we prepare the police for what it is they need to know in order to function as effective law enforcement officers. But we also are constantly looking at trends and changes, particularly on the coasts, because they have a tendency to work their way in, just like the crimes have a tendency to work their way in. Fentanyl was a big problem on the coasts a few years ago, and it comes into Kansas. We try to prevent that, but we can't always do that. But what we do is we recognize that those problems do have a tendency to do that. And we make sure that we have training that's available to law enforcement before the problem gets here. That's our ideal, so that you're trained on how to deal with something before it becomes a problem in Kansas. We also are constantly looking at the headlines to see, frankly, where other law enforcement agencies, other states have not done so well. I look at Uvalde, for example, and the tragedy at Uvalde. As a trainer for the past 28 years in law enforcement, I looked at the training that they provided, and that was entirely predictable. The training was not an effective training for dealing with an active shooter. It was a PowerPoint presentation. You don't learn how to deal with an active shooter with a PowerPoint presentation. That kind of training that kind of an event is constantly pushing us at the Law Enforcement Training Center to constantly have the students up out of their seats. We do a lot more role play than we ever have before. We also do a lot more scenario-based training. We avoid PowerPoint training whenever we can. I mean, it's a necessary evil sometimes, but we're always trying to avoid that. The time to find out that you don't know physically how to deal with an active shooter is not when you the first time go in and have to deal with an active shooter. We also know, we see the trends of things that are happening across the country that really never have happened before. Right now, we're at a stage where domestic terrorism and the extreme polarization of the public, more of an issue than we've ever seen before. So it's requiring a different way of policing when you're policing those kinds of extremist groups. When you, for example, are dealing with the issue of somebody or some group delivering 100 letters of white powder to members of this body. How do you deal with that? That's not something that we would have thought 20 years ago that that's something that we would need to be doing as a local law enforcement officer. But now we do. We recognize that's an issue. We continue to see issues, violent crimes against children as issues, and we continue to see, and the one that is just amazing to me is the just brazen retail crime, where people will just walk in as a group, 4 or 5 people walk in, take what they want, and just leave. It's surprising to me, shocking to me that sort of thing would happen. And as I'm researching it just for this presentation, Wichita, Kansas made the national news for how often it's happening in Wichita, which I like for Kansas to lead the way on news stories, but that's not the news story I want to lead the way. We also know that one of the biggest problems that we're facing right now in law enforcement is staffing. We're unable to staff law enforcement where it needs to be staffed. And training is an issue with staffing. People leave if they don't feel adequately trained. If they feel scared, if they feel like they're unprepared to deal with the issues, then they don't stay. So training is absolutely a current thing on our agenda. So what are we doing about this? Like I told you, you created us to deal with those sorts of problems. And so how do we deal with that? Well, let me back off for just 1 second and talk about how do you become a law enforcement officer in Kansas? And there's some words that we use kind of interchangeably, but they're not. So one is commissioning. So you talk about a commissioned officer. Commissioned officer means they're hired by a law enforcement agency to exercise law enforcement authority in their community. That's a commissioned officer. Certified officer. A certified officer is essentially a licensed law enforcement officer, meaning they're eligible to be commissioned. So they've been through the training, they've demonstrated their competency as a law enforcement officer. And that's also how the CPOST, which you probably are familiar with, that's how they regulate the behaviors of law enforcement, is through their commissioning. They get it by meeting certain criteria, one of which is training, and they lose it by behaviors that they are involved in that they shouldn't be, just like any other profession is licensed. So I'd like to jump ahead a little bit. That's what we do. And I'd like to jump a little bit in how we do that. So we have two different areas at KLETC that we focus on. One is basic training and one is continuing education training. Basic training is a 14-week, 560-hour program where law enforcement officers learn the basic skills to be a law enforcement officer. And when I say basic skills, I mean basic skills. We don't expect them to leave our basic training as an expert. We expect them instead to leave as a person who's ready to continue to practice the profession and to continue to learn within the profession. The legislature requires law enforcement to get 40 hours of continuing education every year. So if you talk about a person who's a law enforcement officer for 20 years, that's 800 hours. See, I still remember a little bit of my math, but that's 800 hours of continuing education. So you get more continuing education than what you get in basic training. And we recognize that. And we recognize that as an opportunity for us to continue to shape and to develop the profession through the training that we offer. The basic training, we train about 288 officers a year at KLETC, which is a residential campus. We have 2 dormitories at KLETC. And we train another approximately 200 officers per year in remote sites. So those of you from Salina, you're probably familiar with the Highway Patrol's Training Center. They use our curriculum and we regulate them, but they conduct their own training. They use their own teachers, largely to be able to teach their own policy. We don't teach policy. We teach primarily law and best practice, and also to teach, to give a flavor for the agency, to teach that the agency culture within the agency. So they've chosen to do their own training, but they have to train what we tell them to train, and we assess them to make sure that they have the competencies when they're finished. That's our basic training function. And our continuing education function is to continue over those 800 hours that an officer has for the rest of their career, to try to give them additional skills that are necessary, depending on what their career path is. If their career path is detective, for example, they might very well want to go a detective route and do continuing education within that area, or operations, that might be their area, or leadership, that might be their area. So we're giving them constant high quality training in that area, or in those areas. So over the past year, we had over 15,000 enrollments in those classes for law enforcement officers. I'm very proud of that. That's a number that has grown considerably in the past 5 years. The nice thing about it is we know we're bringing high quality training to law enforcement, but it is resource intensive. We recognized over the years that we used to take those classes out, and wherever we could find space, we would then hold the class, whether that's in an empty classroom in a school, or whether that's at a training room in an agency or a hotel, wherever we could find the space. Instead, now we have dedicated spaces. We have a dedicated space in Dodge City. We have one in Hayes, and we have one in Pittsburgh, where they're just 2 classrooms, but they're dedicated space where we can keep all of our equipment. We don't have to haul equipment every time we go to put on a class. We also have a part-time coordinator at each one of those places. That's much more efficient when you're dealing with the kind of numbers that we're dealing with. So very excited about what we're doing in continuing education. We're also, you may have heard, we have some press on this, not as much as I would like to see, but you may have heard also about law enforcement accreditation. Law enforcement accreditation, we call it CLEAP, the Kansas Law Enforcement Accreditation Program. And it's for law enforcement agencies that want to be accredited. Prior to us doing that, in order to be accredited, you had to look at national accreditation, which was very expensive and very burdensome. So we developed an accreditation that was more affordable and that would be more attainable to smaller agencies as well. So we use that also as a tool to help law enforcement agencies. So that's what we're doing at KLETC. That's what we're working on a daily basis. What I'd like to talk about a little bit, since I have you all here and have your attention, is our budget. And our budget is currently, like I mentioned, it's all fee funded. We've never had any general fund appropriations for our budget. In talking to leadership, when we were looking at if you look at our funding history that you have in front of you, we get a change in our appropriation, in our revenue source, about every 4 years. And that's how our budget is set up, essentially, that we increase the revenue, whether it's a docket fee, remittance level, or whether it's a tag fee, about every 4 years. The latest one that we've had was in 2016. We're actually working with monies from 2016, or revenues that were established in 2016, and that's not meeting our needs at this point. And so we came, as we have over the years since 1982, we came to the legislature with the idea that we would increase some fee, whatever that would be, whether that would be docket fees or tag fees or whatever it is that would be your interest in changing. And in talking to leadership, it was suggested that we move into a general fund. We've gotten big enough that we really need to be a part of general fund appropriations. This summer, I presented to the Committee on Juvenile Justice and Corrections, the Joint Committee. They also came forward with a recommendation that we move into general fund. And then also they've introduced a bill now to take away our fees. So that always is a little disconcerting when the takeaway bill has been introduced, but nothing has been introduced to replace that funding. So that's what I'm asking you all for today. I have in front of you our budgets for the past 6 years. It's also unusual for me to do a 1-year budget because our fees have to last us for 4, 5, 6 years. So we do longer term budgets than that. But we are requesting that when you do take our fees from us and sweep our carry forward, that you replace that with an appropriation of $12 million back into our budget. That will put us where we more or less should have been had we continued to have the revenues that we needed. Also, it replaces revenues. Those fees weren't even at 2017 levels because they've decreased by about 24%. I'm sure all docket fee agencies have complained about the same thing, that docket fees have gone down over the past several years. Actually, over the past 10 years, they've been going down. So it would replace the docket fee money that has been going down, and it also gets us to where we need to be to meet our needs. So, Mr. Chair, that is my presentation today, and I'm certainly open to questions.
Thank you, Darren. We'll start with some questions by committee members. Start with my vice chair and kind of work my way to the left, and we'll go back to the right.
Okay, I've just got 3 or 4 quick questions. Do you ever do any work at Crisis City?
We don't use Crisis City. Really, that's more of a National Guard mission than a KLETC mission to do outside. I mean, it's like a mass casualty type events. If we were asked, we would certainly participate, but we wouldn't be the lead agency on that.
Well, I went to a presentation out there, and it was an active shooter thing, and we did, scenarios where they showed videos. It was pretty interesting. So you say you have 14 weeks of basic training.
That's correct.
Kind of take me through the time frame from the time an applicant comes into a police department or a sheriff's office and they apply and they get accepted. They get sent to the academy, right?
That's correct.
And then after 14 weeks, then what happens? How long is it before they're ready to go?
So after 14 weeks, it becomes the agency's issue. Some agencies have a follow-on program that is the field training officer program, a kind of a ride-along and an apprentice program. Some do not. Some agencies, after 14 weeks, you get your gun in your car and you're ready to go. But that is a local decision by the chief or sheriff.
So I've talked to the police chief, former police chiefs in Salina before, and they said one of the biggest issues with hiring people, and they were never at full staff. They've got slots for 85 officers, and generally they ran in the low to mid 70s. I think about 76 out of the 85 is the most they ever had. And the police chief would say part of the problem was it takes so long from the moment they're hired to get them ready to go and in the field. Do you find a lot of people dropping out during basic training?
So we do have some people that drop out. I would say those who drop out, it's a good thing. Basic training gets them to the point, particularly with our scenarios, you're actually experiencing what a law enforcement officer is going to be doing in the field. And there's a lot of people that get to that point in the training, which is fairly early on, and they say, this isn't for me. I had no idea. I always joke about my wife. She watches the On Patrol Live show. I don't know if you've ever watched that, but she likes to watch it. It's cameras with cops, and they go around and video what the cops are doing. And she said, I think I could be a cop, but I don't want to have to touch people. Well, no, that's part of it. Sometimes you have to touch people, but and I make light of that, but there are people who actually get to the point in the training where they have to make a life or death decision and they decide they don't want to. That's not something they feel they can do. That doesn't happen very often, and we don't have very many people who drop out. We do have some people that don't make it through. We do everything that we can do to get them through. Not everybody does. We have about a 96% pass rate, 97% pass rate. That's going down a little bit. But like I said, we do everything we can with what we have, just not everybody is cut out for it.
And my final question, Mr. Chair. So what is there any compensation while they're in basic training? How are there fees they have to pay? I mean, how exactly does that work?
Sure. There are no fees for them while they're in training, but they are paid their salary from their agency. Think of it, we use the same sort of model as the military. When you go to basic training, you're an employee and you're getting your training for free and you're living there on campus.
So the agency that's hiring them is the one who pays them.
Yes.
So people are there at different rates of pay then.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to believe Representative Amix and did Representative Schmidt. Rajas, did you have your hand up? Okay. We'll go Representative Amix next.
Mr. Chair. Darren, did I understand? Well, first of all, back up a second. There are some law enforcement agencies in the state right now that put on their own academies.
That's correct.
Is their program your program that they're putting on?
So their program is regulated by us. So we oversee what they're doing and they have to use our curriculum. I would say it's our program, yes.
And then does the commissioning come through you?
The commissioning is through the CPOST, through the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training.
So in a nutshell, it doesn't matter if the academy is done in-house or if it's done at the training center. We're all receiving the same background in law enforcement, correct?
That's correct. Everybody should get virtually the same quality of training.
So then, if I could, Mr. Chair, the agencies that are putting on their own program, are they buying into your program for the materials that they're using?
No. No. We provide that at no cost. The only cost that they have is the cost of the officers attending, but then whatever staff they're using to teach.
Thank you, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both. That was a really good presentation.
Thank you.
A commissioned officer, when they graduate from their 14 weeks, they're not a commissioned officer?
They are. They actually are commissioned before they get to their 14 weeks. Some of them are.
A certified officer, what's the difference?
So a certified officer, it's a license to be an officer, essentially. And that license, when you're first hired, you get a provisional license. And you have that, and you have 1 year to get your training. And after that year, if you don't have your training, that provisional expires and you're finished.
You mentioned policy.
Yes.
What do you mean when you say policy?
So a policy, for example, in a pursuit situation, we will talk about what the factors are to consider in a pursuit before you choose to pursue, what the law says is required in a pursuit, what kinds of things you need to be aware of. But we don't teach exactly when you would do a pursuit, where an agency may have a policy that says they don't do pursuits. That's their choice.
One more question. If a young man or a young woman doesn't pass, can they come back?
They can, but they have to sit out for a year. That gives them a chance to remediate any issues that they have, whether that be reading, which is typically a concern, or we were just talking yesterday, sometimes it's a maturity level. That gives them another year out in the world and gives them a chance to mature a little bit in their decision making.
When I was in first grade, everybody wanted to be a cop. Everybody. Or a fireman. And we got a shortage of teachers. We got a shortage of policemen. I feel like in our society, we got a lack of respect for these people. That chases people out of the business. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you. And I would agree with you on all points. My wife is still a teacher.
Thank you, Representative Smith. Go over to my right. I believe maybe there were some questions. I don't know from who. Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You said that you're asking for a $12 million appropriation this year. I was just wondering how much it was last year. I think you said there were some materials that were handed out, but I haven't seen the numbers.
Okay. So last year we received, and again, it gets a little confusing when you talk about a fees fund versus a general fund appropriation. We received $7.5 million in new dollars. And then we carried forward nearly $3 million in carry forward money from previous years. That also we elected in those past 2 years to not do the maintenance on campus that needed to be done. And so we essentially carried forward some of our maintenance needs as part of that. So the $12 million would cover the lack of revenue. It would cover, we've been holding 8 positions open because we haven't had the revenue to fill them. And it would also cover deferred maintenance that we have on campus.
And is the 12 million appropriation in the governor's budget?
It is not.
How much money is in her budget? Does it just not say anything about it?
So we've always just received a no limit appropriation. So we have funds, we have money in our fund, but it's not specifically appropriated, as I understand that process. This is unusual for us. This is a new way of doing business, and so going from a fees-based budget to a general fund-based budget has turned out to be a little more complicated than I thought it would be.
Are there any other questions from the committee members? Representative Rajas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks again for your presentation. And I'll look forward to getting the numbers as we see them. Talk about some of the training. Back in the day, it was driving a car and hot pursuits and all that stuff. What about from like a psychological, not only dealing with people, whether it be drugs, alcohol, anger. Is that becoming more a priority, not only to train the officers to deal with folks like that, but also for self-care? It would seem like, in our counties, I represent mostly all small counties. They're constantly sending one or two down to you to get that training. And so and I guess I don't talk to them about, so what'd you learn today about, and, other than, can you not wreck one of our cars, so talk about how that's changed over the last, I don't know, decade.
Sure. I think that's probably one of the areas that's changed the most in our training. When I took over as the director about 6 years ago now, the statistic then, and it really hasn't changed a lot, is that you were 2.4 times more likely to kill yourself as a law enforcement officer than you were to be feloniously killed. 2.4 times more likely, which to me is staggering from a training point of view. We knew that we needed to start doing more to help to address the issue. So we've done some things that I never would have dreamed I would have seen in a training environment. We have yoga for first responders, which is, it's kind of a catchy name, but really it's stretching and breathing. We call it tactical breathing because anything tactical the students love. And so we call it tactical breathing, but it's a way to deal with that stress level. And we believe very strongly that it's not only good for the self-care, but if you are centered as a person, you're much more likely to not act out of that adrenaline dump when you're dealing with the public.
Mr. Chairman, a couple other things. One, I was just thinking, say if somebody that doesn't have law enforcement background gets elected sheriff, they come to you. What if they don't pass? They get a provisional, and a year later, they have to resign as sheriff.
So I think that's a very interesting question. It's a good question. I think it's an open question in the law. I say that because I've only been sued once, and that was the topic, but it never did go to trial. So the law says that a sheriff must attend. It doesn't say that the sheriff must pass. And so I think there's an open question there.
I'm not making an announcement today, but no, I'm just kidding. Okay, and this, Mr. Chairman, this is maybe stepping back just a little bit, but in the broad picture, as we talk about all the things with higher education, and so now a role of vice provost, what does that mean?
So I actually still am director of police training for the state. I still have that regulatory authority. I'm also an associate dean now. The provost and chancellor made me an associate dean of the School of Professional Studies, and then I'm a vice provost. Those positions talk about how I plug into the university. I still do everything that I did as the director of police training, but now I'm having conversations with the other people that are doing academic programs for the university. So I think it was very farsighted on the part of the provost. I think it makes a lot of sense and brings me to conversations, brings the profession of law enforcement into contact with the profession of social work, the profession of journalism. There's just all sorts of areas where we can blend those and everybody benefits.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Sawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, I haven't seen your documents, and this may answer some of this, but I'm trying to understand. So I thought I heard you say your fees raised about $7 million in the last budget year.
In new money, 7.5, right?
And I heard you say earlier they've been going down. So were you getting around 12 million a year previously at some point?
So we had projected to get about $12 million, but no, we haven't been getting that just because the revenue's shortfall.
I'd also assume the reason the governor has zero in your budget is because she still has you fee funded in the budget present. Okay.
Yeah, she still has us as a fee funded agency.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? I will. I did have a question for the reviser. Could you give us some information or the committee about the bill number that would authorize the change from the fee structure to a state general fund model?
So the bill is House Bill number 2491, and it was introduced over the interim by the Joint Committee, the Russ Jennings Joint Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice Oversight. It was assigned to House Appropriations, and there is a hearing on this bill next Thursday, January 24th, in House Appropriations at 9 a.m.
Thank you, Jill. Did you say that was the 24th or the 25th?
It is the 25th. I'm not sure what I said, sir, so excuse me if I said that incorrectly. It's Thursday, the 25th.
Okay, great. Thursday, the 25th. We'll look for an interesting bill hearing about that as well. Darren, if you have any parting comments, I'll give you the floor for any closing remarks.
I don't. I appreciate your attention. I know that talking about methods of funding probably isn't the most exciting thing to do right after lunch, but certainly appreciate your time and your attention. I do believe that there's probably very few things that you can fund, certainly within higher education, that have more impact on the day-to-day lives of citizens and to improve the quality of every county, every city in the state. So I appreciate your support. I appreciate your willingness to let me testify today.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you for making the time for the committee today, and appreciate you in your leadership in your role, and look forward to working with you during the session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll move on to committee announcements. Brianna, Brianna, if you could update the committee about what we have scheduled for next week, kind of go over the committee agenda. I know some of it might be tentative, so.
So I'm going to go over the things that I have that are concrete. So on Tuesday, we're going to start our budget hearings with BSRB, which is the Behavioral Services Regulatory Board. And then we also have Board of Healing Arts. So then on Wednesday, we're going to have Historical Society and Kansas State Library hear those budgets. Thursday, we tentatively have K-State coming and Wesleyan University. And then on Friday, we're going to do recommendations for the budgets that we hear next week. So we're jam-packed.
Does anybody have any questions for Brianna? Representative Rajes?
Mr. Chairman, I believe it's one of the sub requests from K-State. It's the Water Institute, not the broad big K-State.
Correct, Representative. They would be primarily speaking about the Water Institute and kind of what they were thinking about that, just to explain have an opportunity to maybe dive a little deeper. Yeah, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Would you mind if I asked a question and clear off the subject?
Please.
Brianna, how did you beat Florida State so horribly bad?
Brianna, it's up to you if you want to comment.
I don't have an answer.
So next week we do have a fairly full week with some budget presentations by some of the smaller agencies. So what I've asked the agencies to do is to limit their testimony to not more than 30 minutes, I believe. And then that way we have time for questions at the end. So as you go through the hearings next week, please write down your questions and we'll get to them kind of at the end, just to ensure they have enough time to present, but we also have enough time for questions. Also, as you do have questions throughout the committee hearings this session, if you'd let my vice chair know, maybe he can keep a kind of a running tally. That way I make sure to get to everybody in the order that they give the signal to the vice chair. He'll have to let you know what the signal is. So I'm not sure if you're a head scratcher or a little bit of a ear tug, but just
a wink and a nod, I think, will suffice.
okay, very good. So just make sure to get with Vice Chair Sanders. If you have any questions, we'll get you on the list and kind of go through those. Tomorrow, we do have a presentation by the University of Kansas Medical Center, specifically the KU Cancer Center. They've got a lot of exciting things going on, and we want to hear and learn about what those are. So have we received any documents for the presentations for tomorrow? Okay. I do want to, we're going to put everything on the S drive in folders and similar to what we did last year, but I didn't really direct Tessa on printing out a bunch of things from the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center. I wasn't sure what the committee wanted. So I guess I just want to survey you guys. Would you prefer to have printouts of everything, or do you prefer to have those on the S drive?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative?
Yes, I mean, that's fine. S drive is fine, but I would sure like to have them also available days like today so we can view it on the screens. So just moving forward, I'll try to remember to get the habit of bringing my computer, but that would be, if it's, and I know you're brand new, so that's no problem, but you know, to have any of those presentations be available right now, and then if, you know, that would be as we do the presentations.
Okay, so it'd be helpful to get those slides put up on the screens for everybody. Okay. And I know when we do the budget analysis, there will be more documentation from KLRD about all the higher ed budgets. I did learn from Chairman Waymaster that when we report out this year on the higher ed institutions, that we will be doing it an institution at a time. So it'll be broken down a little bit differently than it has in the past. It won't be under the Kansas Board of Regents per se, but it'll be segmented out a little bit differently. So I'm not sure what that's going to look like on paper, but there will be a little bit of a change there. So, and again, if you guys have any bill introductions throughout the session, please let me know in advance if you would, and then we can kind of go from there. But I don't anticipate our committee working on too many non-budgetary bills. Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say that I'd like to have paper copies as we go throughout all the budget hearings like we have in the past.
Okay, very good. So thanks for your feedback and thanks for all the good questions today. I know we're just getting warmed up, but look forward to working with each of you this session. But is there any other announcements? If not, I will adjourn the meeting. The meeting is adjourned.